long breath. Now the Drakari are coming, and everything I believed seems meaningless. He pulled up a holographic display showing the swarm's advance. Red markers covered nearly a third of the galaxy. We have tried everything, he said. The Valori's predictive algorithms, the Kethmer's overwhelming firepower, the collective's synchronized fleet tactics. Nothing works. The swarm adapts to every strategy after a single engagement. They learn faster than we can innovate. I know, Hendricks said. We have been watching. I need to understand something. Morthax leaned forward. I need to understand what makes humans different. Not the propaganda we tell ourselves. Not the fear-driven stories. The truth. Why are you the way you are? Hendricks was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Do you know what Earth was like when we evolved? She asked. Not the garden world it became after we learned to control our environment. The planet that made us. I have read the reports. Then, you know we call it a death world. Everything on Earth was trying to kill us. Predators, disease, weather, natural disasters. Even other humans. She paused. We did not evolve intelligence to avoid conflict. We evolved it to win conflicts. Morthax nodded slowly. The Valori evolved on a world with no large predators. Cooperation was the key to survival. Exactly. Your species learned that working together peacefully was the best path. That fighting was inefficient. That violence was a sign of failure. Hendricks smiled slightly. Humans learned the opposite. We learned that the universe is not fair. That peaceful species get eaten. That the only way to survive is to be better at violence than whatever is trying to kill you. But that was millions of years ago. Surely you have evolved beyond that, have we? Hendricks shook her head. Every human carries 10,000 years of warfare in their cultural memory. We have stories about it, songs about it. We teach our children the names of our greatest warriors. We celebrate battles that happened before we could write. She met his eyes. You see war as an aberration, something that happens when civilization fails. We see it as a conversation, a dialogue between powers. And we have been speaking that language longer than most of your species have existed. Morthax sat back in his chair. That is terrifying. I know. How do you live with it? Knowing what you are? Hendricks considered the question. The same way any species lives with its nature. We do not pretend to be something we are not. We know we are capable of terrible things. We also know we are capable of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She paused. You have spent 80 years trying to contain us, but we have spent those same years preparing for the day you would need us. What do you mean? Human colonies on the outer rim have been building defenses without authorization. Our engineers have been studying the swarm since first contact. And Admiral Cole's granddaughter commands the carrier USS Defiance. Hendricks allowed herself a small smile. We knew this day would come. We have been waiting for it. Morthax felt something he had not felt in decades. Hope. The council votes tomorrow, he said. I do not know if they will lift the restrictions. They will, Hendricks said with certainty. They have no choice. When civilized people face extinction, they always turn to those who know how to fight. The vote happened the next morning. It was not close. 200 species voted to suspend Galactic Statute 7 Omega. 3 voted against. 12 abstained. Captain Amy Cole received a message aboard the USS Defiance 3 hours later. She was 38 years old, with her grandfather's sharp eyes and her grandmother's steady hands. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, waiting for this moment. Orders confirmed, her communications officer reported. You have tactical authority over the combined fleet. 3,000 ships from 40 species. Cole looked around her bridge. Her crew was young, eager, and human. They had trained their entire lives for a war they were not allowed to fight. Now that war had found them. "Lieutenant Commander Park," she said, "begin tactical analysis of all swarm engagements. I want to know everything they have done and how they responded to our defenses." Ryan Park nodded from his station. He was the best tactical officer in the fleet, a student of her grandfather's methods. "Already started, Captain. We will have preliminary results in 6 hours. Make it 4. Cole stood and walked to the main view screen. The stars stretched out before her, peaceful and uncaring. Somewhere out there, an enemy was coming that had destroyed everything in its path. She thought about her grandfather, about the stories he had told her, about the tactics he had developed that the galaxy had tried so hard to suppress. "The swarm adapts to every strategy," Park said quietly, joining her at the screen. "Every species that has faced them has used their best tactics and lost." "That is because they fought the way civilized species fight," Cole replied. "Predictable, logical, efficient." She smiled, and there was something old and dangerous in that smile. "We are going to fight the way humans fight. And how is that?" Cole turned to face her crew. They were watching her, waiting, ready. They had been preparing for this their entire lives. "We are going to break every rule they think they understand," she said. "We are going to do things that make no logical sense. We are going to show them something they have never seen before." Her voice hardened. "We are going to teach the swarm what Earth taught the Kethmer, what my grandfather taught the Shale, the lesson that the galaxy has tried to forget for 80 years. Park raised an eyebrow. "And what lesson is that?" Cole's smile widened. "Do not start a war with humans, because we will finish it." The Drakari swarm arrived at the Velary's line on a Tuesday. 3,000 Allied ships waited for them, arranged in defensive formations that had been calculated by the best strategists in the galaxy. Captain Amy Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched the enemy approach. "Swarm count at 15,000 units," Lieutenant Commander Park reported. "They outnumber us 5-1. Cole nodded calmly. "Good. I was worried this would be too easy." The Allied commanders had expected her to deploy the standard defensive grid. They had expected her to use the strategies that the Valori had developed over centuries. They had expected logic and efficiency and coordinated response patterns. Cole gave them chaos instead. "All ships, break formation," she ordered. "Execute pattern Omega-7." The Allied fleet scattered. Ships flew in every direction with no apparent coordination. The Valori commanders immediately protested over the communication channels. "What are you doing?" Admiral Vethan demanded. "You are exposing our flanks. You are destroying our defensive lines." "Trust me," Cole replied. And then she cut the channel. The swarm surged forward, its hive mind analyzing the enemy positions and calculating optimal attack vectors. They had fought dozens of species. They had adapted to every tactic. They knew how fleets worked, how commanders thought, how battles were won. They did not know how to process what happened next. Human ships began attacking in patterns that made no tactical sense. They would charge toward the swarm, fire a few shots, then retreat in random directions. They would form up in defensive clusters, then scatter before the swarm could respond. They would target unimportant ships while ignoring critical threats. The swarm's prediction algorithms failed. They could not model randomness. They could not calculate responses to actions that had no logical purpose. For the first time in their existence, they hesitated. "Phase 1 complete," Park announced. "The swarm is confused." Cole watched the enemy fleet with cold satisfaction. Every move they made was being recorded. Every response was being analyzed. Every pattern was being mapped. "They adapt to strategies," she said quietly. So we are not going to give them a strategy. We are going to give them jazz. Jazz, Captain? Improvisation. Every captain doing their own thing within a framework. No two ships fighting the same way. No predictable patterns for the swarm to learn. She smiled. My grandfather used something like this against the Shale. He called it controlled chaos. The enemy could not adapt to what they could not understand. Phase 2 began an hour later. Human ships stopped retreating and started pressing the attack. But they still did not follow any recognizable pattern. One ship would charge alone into enemy lines while others hung back. Groups would form and dissolve within minutes. Targets were selected at random. The swarm began taking losses. Not many at first, but the numbers grew as the battle continued. Their coordination faltered. Their responses became slower. The Allied commanders watched in disbelief. They had expected to lose this battle. They had expected to buy time for evacuation. Instead, they were watching the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced stumble and struggle. How is she doing this? Admiral Vethan asked his tactical officer. I do not know, the officer admitted. Human tactical doctrine is nothing like ours. They are not trying to maximize efficiency. They are not trying to minimize losses. They are just fighting. There has to be a pattern. There's not. That is the point. Phase 3 began at sunset Valery's time. Cole had been waiting for this moment since the battle started. Her psychological warfare team had spent months studying the swarm's hive mind communication. They had analyzed every signal, every pattern, every structure of the collective consciousness that bound the enemy together. Ready the broadcast, Cole ordered. Transmission prepared, her communications officer confirmed. Are you sure about this, Captain? We have never tried anything like it. Neither has anyone else. That is why it will work. The signal went out across the battlefield. It was not a virus. It was not false orders. It was something far more subtle. A concept. An idea. A seed planted in the heart of the hive mind. Fear. The swarm had evolved as a collective. They shared everything. Thoughts, experiences, identity, individual. Survival instinct had been bred out of them millions of years ago. They did not fear death because death was meaningless to a hive. When one unit died, the others continued. The whole survived. But now, suddenly, they felt something new. A tiny voice in the back of their shared consciousness. A whisper that said, I do not want to die. I want to survive. I am more important than the others. The effect was immediate and devastating. Swarm. Units began breaking from their attack patterns. They fled in random directions, ignoring commands from the hive mind. They fought each other for escape routes. They abandoned their formations and scattered into the void. The hive mind screamed across every frequency. It tried to reassert control. It tried to purge the corruption. But the seed had already spread too far. Swarm cohesion collapsing, Park reported, his voice filled with wonder. They are fragmenting. The hive mind is breaking apart. Cole watched the enemy fleet tear itself to pieces. She had won. She knew that. But she did not feel joy or triumph. She felt the weight of what she had done. All ships, she ordered. Pursue and contain. Do not destroy unless necessary. Some of them might be savable. The battle lasted another 6 hours. When it ended, the Drakari swarm had been broken. Thousands of individual units fled into deep space, no longer connected, no longer a threat. The hive mind that had consumed 23 worlds was silent. The cost was high. 600 allied ships destroyed. 12,000 human soldiers dead. Countless more wounded. High Chancellor Morthax came aboard the Defiance 2 days later. He found Captain Cole standing alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. You saved us, he said. The entire galaxy owes you a debt we can never repay. Cole did not turn around. We did what was necessary. I have to ask. Morthax moved to stand beside her. Do you feel anything? Remorse? Guilt? You just destroyed an entire species. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired. I feel tired, she said. I feel sad for the people we lost. I feel relieved that it is over. She finally looked at him. I will feel remorse when I have time. Right now, there's too much work to do. Morthax nodded slowly. He understood now what had frightened the galaxy for so long. It was not that humans were violent. It was that they could be violent and still remain whole. They could face horror and not be destroyed by it. They could do terrible things and still get up the next morning to do what needed to be done. The Council has voted, he said. The human restriction will be modified. Your species will be allowed to serve in defensive command positions. But the full restrictions will not be reinstated. That is fair. Cole returned her gaze to the stars. We never wanted to conquer anyone. We just wanted to be allowed to protect people. 1 week later, Kira Volume updated the official archive entry on humanity. She had witnessed the battle from the observation deck of a Valori cruiser. She had seen things she would never forget. Her final entry read, Galactic lore restricts human warfare capabilities, not because humans are monsters, but because they understand something the rest of us have spent millennia pretending is not true. The universe does not care about civilization. It only respects survival. And humans have never forgotten how to survive. Commander Lisa. Hendricks attended the memorial service for the fallen on Velori's Prime. 12,000 names were read aloud. 12,000 flames were lit. Representatives from 40 species stood together in silence, honoring those who had given their lives. Afterward, a young Velori officer approached her. He was barely out of training, his blue skin still bright and unwarmed by age. Commander, he said hesitantly, may I ask you something? Of course. Why do humans fight so hard? What makes you willing to die for people you have never met? Species that feared you and restricted you for 80 years? Hendricks looked up at the stars. They were the same stars she had watched her entire life. The same stars that humans had been watching since they first looked up from their death world and wondered what was out there. Because someone has to, she said simply. The universe is dangerous. There will always be something out there that wants to consume or destroy or enslave. Someone has to stand against it. She smiled sadly. Humans have been doing that for a very long time. We have gotten good at it, and we do not know how to stop. The young officer thought about this. That sounds like a burden. It is. Hendricks turned to walk away, then paused. But it is our burden, and we will carry it as long as we have to. She looked back at the memorial, at the flames burning for the dead. That is what being human means. We remember how to fight, and we never forget why we fight. She walked into the night, leaving the young officer alone with the stars and the flames and a new understanding of the strange, dangerous, wonderful species called humanity. The swarm was broken. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the darkness, humans stood watch, ready for whatever came next, because that was what they had always done, and that was what they would always do. The great chamber fell silent when the lights dimmed. 200 species sat in their designated sections, their translators humming softly as they waited for the presentation to begin. Some had tentacles. Others had scales. A few existed as clouds of gas contained in special suits. But they all shared one thing in common. They were afraid. Kira Volume stood at the center of the chamber, her blue skin glowing faintly under the presentation lights. She was young for a Valori, barely 300 years old, and this was her first time addressing the full Galactic Council. Her hands trembled, as she activated the holographic display. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I have been asked to present the historical records regarding Galactic Statute 7 Omega. Many of you are new to this council. Many of you have never witnessed what the older members have seen. Today, you will understand why the statute exists." High Chancellor Morthax watched from his elevated platform. He was ancient, even by galactic standards. His reptilian eyes had seen empires rise and fall. His scales had turned from green to gray over the centuries. And he remembered. He remembered everything about the humans. "Before we begin," Kira Volume continued, "I must address the current crisis. The Drakari swarm has broken through our outer defenses. 12 colony worlds have fallen in 6 cycles. The Valori fleet, the strongest in the galaxy, engaged them at the Korath Nebula." She paused. "We lost 60% of our ships in 4 hours. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Valori were supposed to be unbeatable. Their ships were the fastest. Their weapons were the most advanced. Their tactical algorithms could predict enemy movements with 98% accuracy. The swarm adapts," Kira Volume explained. "Every tactic we use, they learn. Every weapon we deploy, they counter. Our predictive systems are useless against an enemy that evolves in real time." She looked around the chamber. "This is why some council members have suggested we ask the humans for help." The murmurs turned to gasps. Several representatives rose from their seats in protest. A Kethmar delegate slammed his fist against his console. "The humans are restricted for a reason," he shouted. "Have you forgotten what they did?" "I have forgotten nothing," Morthax said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. But Kira Volume is right. We must consider all options." He turned to the young archivist. "Continue." Kira Volume nodded and activated the next display. A blue and green planet appeared in the center of the chamber. Earth. It looked peaceful from space. Beautiful, even. But the data scrolling beside it told a different story. "Humanity joined our community 300 years ago," she said. "When we first made contact, we expected to find another species ready for enlightenment. We expected peaceful scholars, eager to join the galactic family." She let out a small laugh. "We were wrong." The display changed to show human history. Wars. Endless wars. Conflicts that lasted for generations. Weapons that grew more destructive with each passing century. Cities burned. Nations fell. And through it all, humans kept fighting. In their entire recorded history, Kira Volume said, there has never been a single year without armed conflict somewhere on their planet. Not one. They fought over land. They fought over resources. They fought over ideas. They fought over things so small that our translators cannot even find equivalent concepts in our languages. She zoomed in on various historical images. Soldiers in primitive armor charging across fields. Ships made of wood firing cannons at each other. Metal vehicles rolling through destroyed cities. And finally, the mushroom cloud of their first atomic weapon. They developed the ability to destroy their entire planet, Kira Volume said quietly. And they did not stop fighting. They simply found new ways to fight. In the human section of the chamber, Commander Elisa Hendricks sat perfectly still. She was the official military attaché for Earth, a position that mostly involved attending meetings and reassuring nervous aliens that humans were not planning to conquer anyone. She had held this job for 15 years. She had learned to keep her face neutral, no matter what was said about her species. But inside, she was smiling. The council members did not understand humans. They thought they did. They had studied human history, human psychology, human warfare. They had written thousands of papers and passed hundreds of laws designed to contain what they saw as a dangerous species. But they had missed the most important thing. Humans were not dangerous because they were violent. Many species were violent. The Kethmer had conquered 40 worlds through brutal force. The Shale Collective had wiped out entire civilizations. The Drakari swarm consumed everything in its path. Humans were dangerous because they were survivors. Kira Volume continued her presentation, showing the various restrictions placed on humanity. They could not hold command positions in joint military operations. They could not teach at interstellar combat academies. They could not share their tactical doctrines with other species. They could not deploy what the statute called psychological warfare methodologies. These restrictions have been in place for 80 years, Kira Volume said. And in that time, humanity has been peaceful. They trade with us. They share their art and their music. They contribute to scientific research. Many council members have come to see them as just another species in our community. She turned off the display and faced the chamber directly. But I have spent the last 10 years studying the archives. I have read every report, every analysis, every classified document about human warfare. And I must tell you something that the older council members already know. The chamber was completely silent now. We did not restrict humanity because they are violent, Kira Volume said. We restricted them because of how they handle violence. When other species go to war, they suffer. They experience trauma. They need generations to recover. But humans, she shook her head. Humans adapt. They process mass death through something they call humor. They find meaning in struggle. They grow stronger through conflict. She looked at Commander Hendricks, who met her gaze without expression. We restricted humanity because they are good at war. Too good. They have been doing it for so long that it has become part of who they are. And that terrifies us. Morthak stood slowly, his ancient bones creaking. The question before this council, he said, is simple. The Drakari swarm is coming. Our fleets have failed. Our tactics have failed. Our most advanced species have fallen before their advance. He looked around the chamber. Do we lift the restrictions and ask humanity for help? Or do we face extinction while following our own laws? The vote would not happen today. There would be debates, arguments. Some would rather die than unleash what they had spent 80 years trying to contain. But Commander Hendricks already knew the outcome. She had seen it before, in 100 different forms throughout human history. When civilized people faced destruction, they always turned to those who knew how to fight, and humans had never forgotten how to fight. 200 years before the Drakari crisis, Captain Daniel Ortiz stood on the bridge of the ESS Unity and watched the alien ships descend through Earth's atmosphere. He was 43 years old, a veteran of 3 ground wars, and he had never believed in life beyond their planet. Now he was looking at proof that everything humanity knew was about to change. The Valori came first. They were tall and blue-skinned, with voices like music and technology that seemed like magic. They spoke of peace. They spoke of joining a great galactic community. They offered to share their knowledge, their medicine, their understanding of the universe. Earth's governments were cautious but hopeful. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new era. Perhaps humanity could finally put aside its differences and reach for the stars. That hope lasted exactly 14 months. The Kethmer arrived without warning. Their ships were massive, black, and covered in weapons that made Earth's nuclear arsenals look like toys. They did not come to negotiate. They did not come to trade. They came to conquer. Your species has been designated for labor extraction, their message said. Resistance is inefficient. Surrender your population centers, and you will be permitted to survive as workers. The Valori observer assigned to Earth, Admiral Vethkon, immediately contacted his government for instructions. The response came quickly. Do not interfere. Earth was not a member of the galactic community. The Valori had no legal obligation to defend them. And the Kethmer Dominion was powerful. Very powerful. "I am sorry," Bethkon told Captain Ortiz. "There is nothing we can do. The Kethmer have conquered 40 worlds. Their military technology is centuries ahead of yours. My advice is to surrender. They will enslave your population, but at least you will survive." Ortiz stared at the alien for a long moment. Then he laughed. "You don't know us very well," he said. The integration wars began the next morning. The Kethmer expected it to be over in days. They had done this many times before. Primitive species always resisted at first. They always failed. It was simply a matter of demonstrating overwhelming force until the natives accepted their fate. But humans did not accept their fate. When the Kethmer destroyed a city, humans fled into the countryside and attacked supply lines. When the Kethmer secured an area, humans came back at night and took it again. When the Kethmer captured human soldiers, those soldiers escaped and brought back intelligence about enemy weaknesses. Dr. Mira Santos was a xenopsychologist working with the Valori observation team. Her job was to document what was happening, to study how humans responded to contact with a superior civilization. What she witnessed changed everything she understood about intelligent life. "They are not behaving rationally," she wrote in her reports. "By any standard measurement, they should have surrendered weeks ago. Their weapons cannot penetrate Kethmer armor. Their ships cannot match Kethmer speed. They are losing 10 soldiers for every enemy they kill. And yet, they continue to fight." She interviewed human soldiers whenever she could. She asked them why they kept going when the situation was so hopeless. Hopeless? One young private said, confusion on his face. "We have not lost yet. We are still here. As long as we are still here, we can still win." This attitude baffled the Valori. In their culture, warfare was a mathematical equation. You calculated the odds. If they were against you, you surrendered to minimize losses. Fighting a battle you could not win was considered a form of mental illness, but humans did not think that way. They had a saying, "It is not over until it is over." They had another saying, "Where there is life, there is hope." They had hundreds of sayings about fighting against impossible odds, about never giving up, about victory through determination. Captain Ortiz took command of Earth's defense after the first year. He had no ships that could match the Kethmer in open battle. He had no weapons that could destroy their carriers. So he changed the rules. "We cannot beat them in space," he told his commanders. "So we will beat them on the ground. We cannot destroy their ships, so we will capture them." The first captured Kethmer vessel was taken by a team of 200 soldiers who boarded it through an emergency airlock. They fought through the corridors with guns and knives and bare hands. They lost 140 people, but they took the ship. Within 18 months, human engineers had figured out how the Kethmer warp drive worked. They built their own. Admiral Bethkon reported this to the Valori. Government was something close to panic in his message. The Valori took 6 centuries to develop warp technology after first contact with a spacefaring species, he wrote. Humans did it in 18 months. They did it while fighting a war. They did it by studying captured equipment and filling in the gaps with their own engineering. I do not know what this species is, but they are not normal. The war lasted 20 years. By the end, humans had a fleet of ships built from stolen technology and their own innovations. They had developed tactics the galaxy had never seen. Guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, the deliberate use of fear as a weapon. Captain Ortiz, now Admiral Ortiz, led the final assault on the Kethmer homeworld. He used their own ships against them. He turned their communication networks into traps. He landed troops on their capital city and fought street by street until the Dominion's leaders surrendered. The Kethmer had conquered 40 worlds. They had never lost a war. They had never even imagined losing a war. Humans broke them in 20 years. Dr. Santos finished her final report as the war ended. She had studied humans for 2 decades. She had watched them suffer terrible losses and keep fighting. She had seen them mourn their dead and then go right back into battle. She had witnessed things she could not explain. Human psychology is fundamentally different from other known species, she concluded. They do not process warfare as trauma to be avoided. They process it as a challenge to be overcome. They have a term for this: competitive aggression adaptation. They treat war the way other species treat games or sports. They want to win. Losing is not acceptable, no matter the cost. She included one final observation. The most disturbing aspect of human warfare is not their violence. Many species are violent. It is their recovery. After major battles, after terrible losses, human soldiers engage in something called dark humor. They make jokes about death. They laugh about near misses and close calls. They sing songs about fallen friends. This allows them to process trauma without being destroyed by it. It allows them to fight again the next day. She paused before writing the last line. I believe we have made a serious mistake in letting this species reach the stars. But it is too late now. They are here, and the galaxy will never be the same. 80 years before the Dracari crisis, Admiral Nathan Cole received orders that would change galactic history. The Shale Collective, a species made of living crystal, had attacked a colony world in the Kairos system. The colony was home to 30,000 Valori citizens and 12,000 humans. The Shale had killed half of them in the first hour. The Galactic Council authorized a joint fleet response. Ships from 20 species gathered at the staging point. And for the first time ever, a human was given tactical command. Admiral Cole was 56 years old. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 32 years. He had fought in border skirmishes, pirate hunts, and one major engagement against the rogue Kethmer faction. He was respected by his peers and feared by his enemies, but the galactic community did not know what they were about to witness. The Shale Collective had 300 ships defending the Kairos system. They were silicon-based life forms, essentially living computers, and their coordination was perfect. Every ship moved as part of a greater whole. Every action was calculated for maximum efficiency. The Valori had fought them before and knew they were dangerous opponents. Cole studied the enemy for 3 days before giving any orders. He watched their patrol patterns. He analyzed their communication frequencies. He noted how they responded to probes and scouts. His allied commanders grew impatient. We have superior numbers, the Valori fleet commander said. We should attack now while we have the advantage. Cole shook his head. Numbers do not matter if we do not understand the enemy. Give me 2 more days. On the 5th day, Cole called a meeting of all ship captains. What he proposed shocked them. The Shale are connected through a hive network, he explained. They share information instantly across their entire fleet. If one ship sees something, they all see it. This is their greatest strength. He smiled. It is also their greatest weakness. He outlined his plan. It was complex. It was dangerous. And it violated several established rules of galactic warfare. You want us to lie to them? The Valori commander asked, disbelief in his voice. I want us to make them lie to themselves, Cole corrected. Their network runs on trust. Every ship believes what the other ships tell them. We are going to break that trust. The battle began the next morning. Cole sent in the first wave, a standard attack formation that the Shale easily predicted and countered. He lost 12 ships. The galactic observers recorded it as a failed assault, but Cole was not trying to win that engagement. He was taking notes. The second wave came 6 hours later. This time, Cole used a different formation. Again, the shell countered it perfectly. Again, Cole lost ships. Again, he recorded everything. What is he doing? The observers asked each other. He is throwing away ships for nothing. But Cole was not throwing away ships for nothing. He was learning the shale's response patterns. He was mapping their decision trees. He was finding the gaps in their perfect coordination. On the third day, Cole launched his real attack. Human ships broke formation and scattered across the battlefield in what looked like chaos. The shale's prediction algorithms could not process random movement. They hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Cole's communication teams broadcast a signal directly into the shale network that it was not a virus. It was not an attack. It was false information that looked exactly like real shale communications. Enemy ships approaching from Sector 7. Retreat ordered by command carrier. Friendly fire detected in Sector 12. The shale fleet began to tear itself apart. Ships that had never questioned their network started receiving contradictory orders. The hive mind that made them so efficient became a weapon against them. Crystal commanders who had never experienced confusion were suddenly paralyzed by it. Cole pressed the advantage. He sent in boarding parties. Commander Kate Morrison led the assault on the shale command carrier. Her team of 60 humans breached the hull in 3 locations. They fought in zero gravity, bouncing off walls and firing in all directions. They fought in rooms filled with toxic gases that should have killed them in minutes. They wore their suits until the filters failed, then held their breath and kept fighting. Morrison lost 42 of her 60 soldiers taking that ship. When it was over, she stood on the bridge surrounded by shattered crystal bodies and reported her success to Admiral Cole. "Objective secured," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, awaiting further orders. A Valori observer who witnessed the battle later described what he saw. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like something else. Something I do not have words for. They were injured, and they kept fighting. They watched their friends die, and they kept fighting. They ran out of ammunition, and they fought with their hands. I have studied warfare for 200 years. I have never seen anything like this. The battle lasted 6 weeks. When it ended, the Shale Collective's military was completely destroyed. Their homeworld was blockaded. Their leaders surrendered unconditionally. The galactic community celebrated the victory. The Kairos colony was saved. The Shale threat was ended, but the celebration did not last long. Reports began coming in about human behavior during the battle. The boarding parties. The psychological warfare. The way Cole had systematically exploited enemy weaknesses with what some called cruelty. And then there was the aftermath. A Valori journalist interviewed Commander Morrison 1 week after the battle. She asked how the commander felt about the 300 Shale soldiers who died on the command carrier. Morrison shrugged. "They shot first. We shot last. That is how it works. But do you feel anything?" The journalist pressed. "Regret? Sorrow? Guilt?" Morrison thought about it for a moment. "I feel tired," she said. "I feel glad my people who survived are okay. I feel hungry because I have not eaten a real meal in 2 days." She paused. "I do not feel guilty for winning. Should one?" The interview spread across the galaxy. Commentators analyzed every word. Psychologists wrote papers about what it revealed about human nature. Politicians demanded action. Admiral Cole's after-action reports made things worse. They were detailed, thorough, brutally honest about every tactic he had used and why. He explained how to break a hive mind. He explained how to turn an enemy's coordination against them. He explained psychological warfare in terms so clear that any species could understand and apply them. The Galactic Council sealed those reports by unanimous vote. Senator Grethel of the Valori government drafted what would become known as the human restriction. He argued that human warfare tactics were too dangerous to be shared, that human commanders were too effective to be given authority over other species, that humanity's psychological relationship with violence was fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. The vote was close. 14 species wanted humanity expelled entirely, but humans had become economically essential to the galactic community. They could not be removed without causing a depression, so they were restricted instead. Admiral Cole retired quietly. Commander Morrison became an advocate for human rights in the galactic community. The Shale Collective eventually rebuilt, though they never threatened anyone again, and the galaxy learned to fear what humans could do when they were allowed to fight. What they did not know was that humans had been watching too. They had seen how the galaxy reacted to their victory. They had heard what the politicians said about them. They had read the restrictions placed on their species, and they had started preparing for the day when the galaxy would need them again. High Chancellor Morthax had not slept in 4 days. The reports on his desk showed nothing but bad news. 23 worlds consumed by the Drakari swarm, 200 million dead. The largest fleet in galactic history scattered and broken. He stood at the window of his office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm was moving closer. It would reach the galactic core in 6 months. Maybe less. The door chimed. "Commander Hendricks to see you," his assistant announced. Morthax closed his eyes for a moment. He had avoided this meeting for as long as he could. He had hoped that his own people would find a solution, that they would not need to do what he was about to do. "Send her in." Lisa Hendricks entered the office with the quiet confidence that Morthax had come to recognize in humans. She was neither aggressive nor submissive. She simply was, like a force of nature that did not need to prove anything to anyone. "Chancellor," she said, nodding politely. "Commander." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." They faced each other across his desk. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Morthax spoke. "I voted for the restrictions," he said. 80 years ago. I was there at Kairos 9. I saw what Admiral Cole did." He paused. "I saw how your soldiers behaved afterward. The jokes, the laughter, the songs about death." "Yes," Hendricks said simply. "I have spent 80 years believing that decision was correct, that humanity needed to be contained, that your species was too dangerous to be given power over others. And now?" Morthax let out a